The night sky was filled with broken stars as Arun's small exploration ship fell through the clouds of the alien world. Sparks trailed behind the vessel, fire tearing through the sky like a comet. Arun gripped the controls, trying to keep the ship from splitting apart. Warning lights blinked across the console. The ground came closer and closer until at last the ship struck the trees with a deafening crash. Branches snapped and metal bent, but somehow the cockpit remained intact. Arun pulled himself free from the wreck, coughing on the smoke that curled around him. His legs shook, and a sharp cut ran across his arm, but he was alive. Around him stretched an endless forest, tall trees glowing faintly with blue veins that pulsed like rivers of light. Strange sounds echoed through the darkness, cries and calls of creatures he could not yet see. He knew he had no choice. If he wanted to survive, he had to find shelter, food, and water. The wreck of the ship gave him a few supplies. He strapped a small pack to his back, took a light beacon, and carried what little food remained. As he stepped into the forest, the night air felt cool against his skin. Leaves brushed his shoulders, and the ground seemed soft and damp. Every sound made him turn quickly, every shadow made him tighten his grip on the beacon. Hours passed as he walked deeper between the trees. He was tired, his body aching, when he suddenly heard something unexpected. A small voice carried through the forest. It was high and frightened, like that of a child. Arun froze in place, unsure if it was real or a trick of his imagination. Then he heard it again, closer this time. "Daddy," the voice cried. Arun's heart pounded. He turned his beacon toward the sound, and there in the shadows stood a small figure. She was no human child. Her skin shimmered faintly with silver tones, and markings like flowing rivers traced across her arms. Her eyes were wide, glowing with a soft light that seemed to shine from within. She wore torn cloth, dirt clinging to her knees, and her tiny hands shook as she looked at him. The child stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Daddy," she asked again. Arun knelt slowly, careful not to frighten her. "I am not your father," he said gently, though he kept his voice soft. The little one shook her head and ran straight into his arms. She clung to him tightly, as if she had been waiting for him all along. Arun was startled but did not push her away. Instead, he felt a wave of pity and warmth. She was alone, lost in a dangerous forest, and for reasons he could not understand, she had decided that he was her parent. "Where is your family?" Arun asked, brushing dirt from her hair. She pointed into the forest but said nothing. Her eyes were wet, and her lips trembled as if the memory was too heavy to carry. Arun understood enough. She was lost and afraid. "All right," he said softly. "Stay with me. I will protect you." The child's eyes brightened. She whispered a single word again, the same word that had first called him through the trees. "Daddy." Arun carried her back toward the wreck of his ship. She did not let go of his hand even once. Along the way, she spoke in short bursts, some words in her own tongue, others learned from somewhere else. She told him her name was Leary. She told him she had been running from shadows in the forest. When Arun asked what shadows, she only shook her head and hid her face against his shoulder. Back at the wreck, Arun built a small fire from fallen branches. The light flickered across the broken hull, warming the cold air. He gave Leary some of his food, and though she sniffed at it curiously, she ate without complaint. When she finished, she leaned against him, her silver eyes watching the flames. For the first time since the crash, Arun did not feel alone. Yet questions filled his mind. Who was this child? Why had she called him daddy the moment she saw him? And why did she seem to know words from his own language? Leary curled up beside him as the night deepened. Strange calls echoed in the distance, but she did not stir. Arun covered her with a strip of cloth from the wreck and kept watch. The stars above the trees glowed faintly through the branches, and for a moment he thought of home, of the people who might never know where he had gone. Still, as he looked at the small child who had chosen him as her protector, he felt something he had not felt in many years. A sense of purpose. He knew he could not abandon her. He would keep her safe, no matter what dangers hid in the forest. The fire burned low, and Arun whispered to the night, though he knew no one was listening but the child. "I do not know why you chose me," he said softly, "but I will not let you down." Leary stirred in her sleep, her small hand finding his. Even in dreams she did not let go. Arun sat awake, guarding her until the first light of dawn touched the alien trees. The forest stretched endlessly before him, filled with dangers and mysteries, but he was no longer just a lone human survivor. Now he carried a greater task. He was, in the eyes of one small alien girl, something more than a stranger. He was her father. Morning light spilled across the alien forest, washing the glowing trees in shades of silver and blue. Birds with long tails circled above, their wings glistening as if made of glass. Strange insects crawled across the bark, humming softly as they moved. Arun sat near the remains of the fire, his eyes heavy from staying awake through the night. Beside him, Leary stirred, stretching her small arms before sitting up. She blinked at him, then smiled. "Daddy," she whispered, the word carrying both trust and relief. Arun gave a tired smile. "Good morning, Leary," he said. He knew he was not her father, but correcting her again seemed pointless. She needed comfort, and if calling him daddy gave her that, he would not stop her. He handed her a piece of dried food from his pack. She sniffed it, wrinkled her nose, then nibbled carefully. Her small silver eyes lit up, and soon she ate more eagerly. Watching her eat made Arun feel lighter. In the middle of this strange and dangerous world, at least they had a small sense of peace. After breakfast, Arun began checking his supplies. His food would not last long, and his water pack was already half empty. The wrecked ship offered little else. If they were to survive, they needed to find fresh water, more food, and hopefully a safer shelter. "Come, Leary," he said, rising to his feet. He held out his hand. Without hesitation, she slipped her hand into his, her tiny fingers wrapping tightly around his. They set out into the forest together. As they walked, Arun noticed how Leary studied everything with wide eyes. She touched leaves, smelled flowers, and listened carefully to the calls of creatures. Every time she saw something strange, she looked up at him with excitement, as if expecting him to explain. "Do you know this place?" Arun asked her gently. Leary nodded, then pointed toward the west. She spoke a few words in her own tongue, then said clearly, "Water." Arun was surprised but pleased. "Yes, water," he repeated, pointing the same way. She laughed softly and tugged at his hand, leading him through the forest with confidence. The journey was not easy. Roots twisted across the ground, and thorny plants brushed against their legs. More than once, Arun thought he saw shadows moving between the trees, watching them. Leary noticed too, for her grip on his hand would tighten whenever the forest grew silent. But each time, Arun gave her a calm smile and kept walking, showing her that he was not afraid. By midday, they reached a stream of clear water that sparkled beneath the light. Arun filled his pack and let Lyri drink. She splashed her hands happily in the stream, laughing for the first time since they had met. The sound of her laughter echoed through the forest, chasing away some of Arun's own fear. They sat together on the bank, resting. Arun used sticks and stones to make simple shapes in the dirt, showing her circles and squares. Lyri copied him, her small fingers tracing carefully. When he drew the symbol of a star, she gasped and clapped her hands. Then she drew her own shape, a symbol from her people, and pointed at it proudly. Arun could not understand its meaning, but he nodded and smiled. "Beautiful," he said. She laughed again, repeating his words slowly, "Beautiful." Her voice stumbled but grew stronger each time. Arun realized she was learning his language at a surprising speed. She wanted to connect with him, and every word she spoke felt like a bridge between their worlds. As the day stretched on, they followed the stream to a sheltered area where the trees grew close together, forming a natural wall. Arun decided this would be a safer place to build camp. He gathered fallen branches and leaves, shaping a small shelter against the trunks. Lyri tried to help, carrying tiny sticks and placing them beside him. Every time she added one, she looked up for his approval, and Arun made sure to praise her efforts. When evening came, they sat by a new fire. Arun shared another meal, and Lyri leaned against him, her head resting on his arm. She spoke softly, mixing her own language with his. From the little he understood, he learned that she had been alone for many days before finding him. She mentioned shadows again, her face growing pale when she did. Arun did not press her for more. He only promised her that she was safe now. As the fire burned low, Lyri surprised him. She placed her small hand on his chest and said, "Family." Arun froze, the word echoing in his heart. He looked at her silver eyes shining with trust, and he felt something shift inside him. He had come to this world as a lone explorer, but now he was no longer alone. This child had chosen him, not because of duty or blood, but because he had shown her kindness when she needed it most. "Family," he repeated softly. Lyri smiled and curled up beside him, falling asleep with her hands still gripping his shirt. Arun stayed awake a while longer, listening to the forest around them. He knew dangers lurked beyond the trees, and he knew their journey was only beginning. But he also knew something else. He was no longer just fighting to survive. He was protecting someone who believed in him completely. And in that belief, he found new strength. The night was darker than before, the calls of creatures closer, but Arun did not feel fear as he once had. With Lyri beside him, clinging to the word daddy, he felt ready for whatever came next. Far away from the glowing forest where Arun and Lyri built their small camp, a great palace rose high above the alien city. Its tall towers curved like crystal spires, shining beneath the twin moons. The walls were carved from stone that pulsed faintly with light, and the banners of the royal family hung heavy in the night air. Inside, the great hall echoed with quiet voices. Guards stood at attention in rows of silver armor, while advisors whispered among themselves. At the center, seated on a throne that shimmered like a river of stars, was Queen Serena. Her long robe of blue silk trailed across the steps, and her silver crown rested on her dark hair. Her face, though strong and regal, was lined with sorrow. For many days she had searched, but her daughter was still missing. The queen rose from her throne, her voice carrying across the hall. "Has there been no word? No trace at all of the princess?" The captain of the guard stepped forward and bowed his head. "We searched the eastern lands. We followed every river and crossed every mountain. The child is not there. We found only footprints that vanish into the forest. Serina's hands clenched the folds of her robe. And the Western Valley. Another soldier spoke, his voice steady but heavy. Empty, my queen. No child, no sign. The queen closed her eyes. Her heart ached with fear, yet she forced herself to remain calm before her people. A queen must not show weakness, but a mother could not silence her pain. Her daughter, the light of her world, was lost somewhere beyond the safety of the city. Rumors had already begun to spread among the nobles. Some whispered that the royal child might never return. Others claimed she had been taken by enemies, or lost to the wilds. Serena knew that every day her daughter was gone, the whispers grew louder. But she refused to give up. At night, when the court was empty, she stood alone at the balcony of the palace, looking out toward the endless forests. The stars above seemed colder now, and the silence weighed on her. She remembered her daughter's laughter, the way her small hands had reached for her whenever storms shook the sky. The thought of her being alone, frightened and hungry, tore at Serena's heart. "Leery," she whispered to the night. "I will find you. I will not stop until you are safe." The next morning, she gathered her council once more. "We have searched with soldiers," she said firmly. "But soldiers do not move quietly. The child may be hiding, afraid. We need hunters, trackers, those who can walk the forest without sound. We must widen the search. Leave no stone unturned, no shadow unchecked." The advisors nodded, but one old counselor raised his voice. "My queen, the forest is dangerous. Creatures roam freely, and storms rise without warning. If the princess was taken by the darkness there, we may never find her." Serena's eyes flashed with sharp fire. "Do not speak of never. As long as I draw breath, there will be hope." The counselor bowed his head, silenced by her words. That very day, groups of skilled trackers set out from the city. They carried light bows and silent blades, their eyes sharp, their steps soft. They followed broken branches, faint trails of footprints, and distant echoes of voices carried on the wind. For days they searched, but the forest swallowed their efforts. Every clue led them deeper, yet the child remained hidden. Then one evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with gold, a small band of scouts returned with news. They had seen movement near the edge of the great forest. Not beasts, not shadows, but something unusual. A figure of human shape, walking with a smaller one at his side. The court fell into whispers when the news was shared. The queen leaned forward on her throne, her voice urgent. "A human? You are certain?" "Yes, my queen," the scout replied. "A human male, dressed in torn clothes. With him was a child with markings of silver on her skin. We could not get closer, but we believe it was the princess." The hall erupted with voices. Some scoffed at the idea that a human could be trusted. Others argued that the child must have been taken. But the queen's heart beat faster. If her daughter was alive, if she was walking with this stranger, then there was hope at last. "Prepare the royal guard," Serena ordered. "We go to the forest at dawn." The soldiers bowed deeply, though unease still stirred among them. Many of them distrusted humans. To them, humans were wanderers, weak and fragile, with no place among the proud alien empires. Yet here was a human walking with the royal child, as if he belonged. That night, Serena did not sleep. She stood in her private chamber, staring at the stars. She thought of the man who walked beside her daughter. Who was he? Why would Leary trust him? Was he a thief, a wanderer, or perhaps something else entirely? The unknown frightened her, yet she felt a spark of gratitude. If Leary was alive, then this stranger had at least kept her safe until now. When dawn broke, the queen herself led the company of guards into the forest. Her robes were replaced with armor, light but strong, crafted with silver plates that gleamed in the rising sun. She carried no weapon, for she wished not to fight but to find. The journey was long. The forest pressed close around them, shadows shifting between the trees. Strange cries echoed in the distance, and the air was thick with mist. Yet Serena pressed on, her heart guiding her steps. At last, near a small stream where the trees grew wide and heavy, one of the scouts raised his hand. "Tracks," he whispered. The queen knelt, her eyes falling on the soft ground. There, pressed into the dirt, were the faint shapes of small feet and larger ones beside them. Her heart leapt. "Leary," she breathed. The guards fanned out, searching carefully. They moved silently, knowing the child could be near. The queen followed the tracks, her heart racing with every step. And as the forest opened into a clearing, she saw it. A small camp built from branches and leaves. A dying fire still smoked in the center. And sitting there, with his back to the trees, was a human man. Beside him, her daughter sat with bright silver eyes, her hand in his. The queen froze at the sight. Her daughter was alive. But she was calling someone else daddy. The clearing was quiet when Arun rose from the small fire and stretched his arms. Smoke drifted lazily into the sky, and the sound of running water from the nearby stream filled the air. Leary sat beside him, humming softly as she played with a string of flowers she had picked. Her small fingers wove the petals together with care, and when she finished, she placed the fragile crown on his head and laughed. "Daddy," she said proudly. Arun smiled and bowed his head as if the crown were made of gold. "Thank you, Leary. It is perfect." Her laughter rang through the trees, and for a moment the forest felt peaceful. But Arun knew too well that peace never lasted long in a wild place like this. In the past few days, he had noticed signs that they were not alone. Broken branches, claw marks on the trees, and the heavy silence of birds that should have been singing. More than once, he had caught sight of shadows moving at the edge of the clearing. They were not soldiers or hunters from the city, but something far darker. That evening, as the sun sank and the forest grew dim, Arun decided to prepare for what might come. He began gathering branches, sharp stones, and vines. With patience, he shaped them into simple traps, hiding them around the camp. Leary watched him curiously, her head tilted. "What doing?" she asked. Arun tightened the last knot and looked at her. "Protecting us," he said simply. Leary's silver eyes grew wide. She nodded, then picked up a stick and mimicked his actions, tying knots clumsily. Though her little traps would never catch anything, Arun praised her, and she beamed with pride. When darkness finally settled, the two sat by the fire. Arun told her stories of the stars, of ships that traveled between worlds, and of people who dreamed of exploring the unknown. She listened with wonder, her face glowing in the firelight. But when a branch snapped somewhere in the forest, her smile vanished. She clutched his arm tightly. "Shadows," she whispered. Arun's heart hardened. He put more wood on the fire, making the flames rise higher. He knew the light would keep many creatures away, but not all. Through the night, he remained awake, his hand resting on a sharpened stick he had shaped into a spear. The first attack came just before dawn. A low growl rose from the trees, followed by glowing eyes watching them from the dark. Arun stood quickly, placing himself between the fire and Leary. The creature stepped into the light, its body long and lean, with dark fur that shimmered like oil. Its jaws opened to reveal rows of sharp teeth. Leary whimpered and hid behind him. Arun raised the spear, his arms steady despite the fear pounding in his chest. The beast crept closer, circling the fire. Just as it lunged, one of Arun's traps snapped shut. A net of vines pulled tight around its legs, dragging it to the ground. The creature roared and thrashed, but could not break free. Arun shouted loudly, waving the spear, and the beast at last tore itself free and fled into the shadows. Leary ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "Daddy brave," she whispered against him. Arun exhaled slowly. "No, Leary," he said softly. "Just careful." But in truth, he knew luck had saved them as much as his traps. When the sun rose, they moved camp. Arun did not want to stay in a place where the shadows prowled so close. They followed the stream deeper into the forest, the trees arching above them like giant guardians. Leary stayed close to his side, her small hand gripping his tightly. As they walked, Arun thought about the danger they faced. He had crashed on this world by accident, but now he carried a responsibility greater than his own survival. Leary was not only a child but also the daughter of someone important. He could see it in her markings, in the way she carried herself despite her fear. She was not ordinary. And if she was so important, then surely others were searching for her. Still, Arun knew they had to survive the forest first. By midday, they found a small cave hidden behind a curtain of vines. It was dry and deep enough to offer safety. Arun cleared the floor of stones and set another fire near the entrance. Leary gathered flowers and lined the walls with them, turning the dark cave into a place of color. For a while, they rested. Arun closed his eyes, but not fully. His ears stayed sharp for any sound of danger. Later that night, more shadows came. This time, it was not a beast but a group of them. Their glowing eyes filled the trees, their growls rising in the air. Arun felt his chest tighten. He could not fight so many. He pulled Leary close and whispered, "Stay behind me." But before the creatures could rush forward, a sound split the night. A horn, loud and clear, echoed through the forest. The beasts froze, their ears twitching, then vanished into the shadows. Arun frowned, confused. Leary's eyes brightened. "Mother," she whispered. Arun looked at her, startled. "Your mother?" She nodded eagerly, pointing toward the distance. Arun followed her gaze. Through the trees, faint lights glimmered, moving closer like stars drifting on the ground. Soldiers, he realized. A company of armored figures, moving in silence. Arun's heart pounded. He had hoped someone would come, but now that the moment was here, he felt uncertain. What would they think when they saw a human with their princess? Would they see him as protector or thief? The sound of armored feet grew louder. Leary held tightly to his hand, unwilling to let go. Her trust in him was unshakable, and that trust was the only thing giving him courage as the figures stepped into view. At their center was a woman in silver armor, her face strong and filled with both grief and hope. Arun needed no words to know who she was. The queen had come. The forest clearing glowed with the light of many torches. Shadows stretched across the trees as armored figures stepped into view, their silver plates gleaming like moonlight. Arun stood at the cave entrance, holding a sharpened spear, though he knew it would be useless against so many. His other hand held Lyri's tightly. She pressed herself against his side, her silver eyes wide with both fear and hope. At the center of the soldiers walked a tall woman in shining armor. Her long cloak trailed behind her, and her crown glimmered faintly under the torchlight. Her steps were firm, but her eyes searched desperately, as if she were chasing a dream she was afraid to lose. When her gaze fell on the small child by Arun's side, her breath caught. "Lyri," she whispered. The girl gasped and ran forward, but only a step before stopping to look back at Arun. She would not let go of his hand. Her grip tightened, her voice trembling as she said, "Daddy." The soldiers around the queen froze. Their eyes shifted from the child to the human. A low murmur rippled among them. Arun could feel the tension rising like a storm. The queen lifted her hand, silencing her guards. She stepped closer, her eyes shining with tears she had tried to hold back for so long. "My daughter," she said softly, her voice breaking with relief. But Lyri only clung harder to Arun's hand and shook her head. She pointed at him and said firmly, "Daddy, stay." The queen stopped in place, her heart torn. For weeks she had dreamed of holding her daughter again, yet now the child stood before her, calling a stranger by the name that belonged to her family. Her chest ached, but she did not show anger. Instead, she looked at Arun. "You are human," she said carefully. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of command. "Why is my daughter with you?" Arun took a deep breath. He could feel every soldier watching him, their hands resting on weapons. But he did not let go of Lyri's hand. "I crashed here," he said. "I found her in the forest. She was alone, afraid, and hungry. I gave her food. I kept her safe. That is all." The queen studied him closely, her sharp eyes searching for lies. Yet the way Lyri pressed against him, the way she refused to let go, spoke more clearly than words. "Do you claim to be her father?" she asked. "No," Arun answered firmly. "I am not her father by blood. But she chose me. She called me that, not I." The silence in the clearing grew heavy. The soldiers shifted uneasily, some glaring at Arun, others glancing at their queen for guidance. At last, the queen lowered her head slightly. "If what you say is true, then you have my thanks," she said. "But you must understand, she is not an ordinary child. She is heir to the throne of this land. She must return with me." Lyri shook her head fiercely. "No," she cried. "Daddy, stay. Daddy, come." Her voice rang out with such strength that even the soldiers hesitated. The queen's lips trembled, though she hid it behind her steady expression. Arun knelt beside Lyri, looking into her eyes. "Lyri," he said softly. "This is your mother. She has been searching for you. She loves you." But the child only clung to him harder, tears beginning to form. "No, leave," she begged. "You stay." The queen's chest ached as she watched. The human spoke with gentle truth, yet her daughter's heart was bound to him. For the first time in her rule, Serena felt powerless. She could command soldiers, move armies, and bend nations, but she could not command the love of a child. "Why does she trust you so?" the queen asked, her voice lower now, almost to herself. Arun looked at her, his expression calm but steady. "Because I treated her as she needed," he said. "Not as a princess, not as an heir, but as a child. She was scared, so I gave her comfort. She was hungry, so I gave her food. She was lonely, so I stayed. That is all. The queen's eyes softened, though her pride still held her upright. She looked at her daughter, who now hid her face against Arun's shoulder, as if afraid her mother might take him away. One of the soldiers stepped forward, his voice hard. "My queen, the child is confused. Let us take her from him. She belongs with her people, not a human." The queen raised her hand sharply. "Silence," she commanded. The soldier fell back instantly. Her gaze returned to Arun. "You have done what even my finest warriors could not. You kept her safe in the wild, where shadows hunt and dangers rise each night. For that, you have my respect." Arun bowed his head slightly but did not release Leary. "I only did what any person should do," he said quietly. The queen's lips pressed together, her heart torn between gratitude and sorrow. She stepped closer, kneeling at last so that she was level with her daughter. "Leary," she said gently, her voice no longer a queen's command but a mother's plea. "It is I. Your mother. Come to me." Leary looked at her with trembling eyes. Slowly, she reached out with her free hand, but still her other hand gripped Arun's. She did not want to choose. The queen's eyes filled with tears. She placed her hand gently over Leary's and whispered, "You will not lose him. But you cannot lose me either." The clearing grew silent. The soldiers lowered their heads, moved by the sight of their queen, proud and strong, kneeling in the dirt before her child. Finally, Leary took a small step forward, placing her forehead against her mother's shoulder. But even as the queen embraced her, the child's tiny hand stayed locked with Arun's. In that moment, Serena understood the truth. This human had become part of her daughter's heart. To tear them apart would only bring more pain. She rose slowly, lifting her daughter into her arms. Leary still clutched Arun's hand, unwilling to release him even as she rested in her mother's embrace. The queen looked at Arun, her eyes meeting his. For the first time, there was no suspicion, no anger, only quiet respect. "Perhaps," she said softly, "this bond is not a mistake. Perhaps it is a gift." The torches flickered in the night air, and the soldiers remained still, waiting for her command. But Serena gave none. She only held her daughter and allowed the human to stand close, knowing that the future had changed in ways no one could yet see. The night was heavy with silence after the queen's meeting with Arun. The soldiers carried their torches low, and no one dared to break the quiet. Leary slept in her mother's arms, yet even in sleep her tiny hand refused to release Arun's fingers. He walked beside them as if he were already part of their company, though every soldier still watched him carefully. They left the forest and entered a wide plain under the stars. Far ahead rose the dark towers of a great city, their spires glowing faintly with lantern light. Arun had seen many cities on different worlds, but this one carried a weight he could not explain. The walls stood tall like cliffs, and banners waved high with a crest shaped like a crown and wings. "This is the capital," said the queen quietly. Her voice was softer now, not the sharp command she had used before. "It has waited long for her return." Arun nodded but said nothing. His eyes stayed on the child who still held him even in dreams. When they reached the gates, horns sounded. The heavy doors swung open, and the streets filled with people rushing to see what had happened. They cheered when they saw the queen, and gasps rose when they saw the little princess in her arms. Voices cried out her name again and again. But when the crowd noticed the human walking beside them, confusion spread. Some whispered in fear, others in anger. The queen raised her hand to calm them, but she did not let Arun fall behind. She allowed him to walk close, as if she had already chosen to protect him. They reached the great palace, its white stone shining under the moon. Guards opened the gates, and inside the courtyard stood a figure waiting. His armor was darker than the queen's, his shoulders broad, and his presence filled the space like thunder before a storm. His crown was simple but heavy, and his eyes burned with both pride and sorrow. It was the king. The queen slowed her steps, her chest tight with both relief and worry. The king had searched as well, sending riders and hunters across the land, but he had never found his daughter. Now she stood before him at last. The moment he saw Lyri, his stern face broke. His arms opened wide, his voice trembling as he said, "My child." Lyri stirred awake at the sound. She blinked, saw the tall figure, and frowned. Her small voice asked, "Who?" The words struck the king like a spear. His arms froze in the air. For so long he had carried the pain of her loss, yet now his own daughter did not know him. "She is young," the queen said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "Her memory is blurred by fear and time." But Lyri turned her face toward Arun and reached for him. "Daddy," she said clearly. The king's head snapped toward the human. His eyes blazed. Around the courtyard, soldiers tensed, hands gripping weapons. "Explain," the king demanded, his deep voice echoing across the stone walls. Arun stood still, though his heart pounded. He bowed his head slightly but kept his voice calm. "I found her in the forest. She was lost and afraid. I cared for her as best I could. She chose to call me that. I did not teach her to say it." The king's hands clenched into fists. His pride warred with his love for his child. "You dare stand here and claim what is mine?" "No," Arun said firmly. "I claim nothing. She is your daughter. She belongs with you and her mother. But she needed me, so I stayed." Lyri clutched Arun's arm tightly, her eyes wet. "No, angry," she whispered, frightened by the tone of her father's voice. The king looked at his daughter and saw the fear in her eyes. His heart softened, though his pride still burned. He turned away, pacing across the courtyard, trying to master the storm inside him. The queen stepped closer, speaking low so only he could hear. "Saren, do not frighten her. She has been through much. This human kept her alive. Without him, we might never have seen her again." The king's jaw tightened. "And now she calls him father. What place does that leave for me?" The queen touched his arm gently. "She will remember. Give her time. But do not forget, love cannot be forced. It must be earned again, even by us." Her words struck him deeply. He looked back at his daughter, still clinging to the human's side. Slowly, he stepped closer, kneeling so that his crown was no higher than her eyes. "Lyri," he said softly, his voice trembling despite his strength. "I am your father. I searched the world for you. I feared I had lost you forever. But here you are. You are my light, my joy." The little girl tilted her head, studying him with the quiet wisdom children often hold. She did not let go of Arun, but she reached out with her small hand to touch the king's face. Her fingers brushed his cheek. "You cry," she whispered. The king closed his eyes as a tear slid down his face. He caught her tiny hand gently in his own. "Yes. I cry because I love you." For a moment, the courtyard grew still. The soldiers who had prepared for anger now lowered their heads, moved by the sight of their king kneeling before his daughter. Arun stood silently, watching. His chest felt heavy, but not with pain. He knew this was right. The child belonged to her family. But still, her small hand gripped his sleeve tightly, unwilling to let go. The queen spoke at last. "We will not tear her heart in two. If she trusts him, then he will remain by her side until she finds balance." The king looked up at her in surprise. "You would allow this?" "I would," she said firmly. "Because our daughter's happiness must come before pride." The king was silent for a long time. His pride told him to refuse, yet his heart saw the truth. To rip the human away would only bring more pain to the child who had already suffered enough. At last, he rose slowly and nodded. "Very well," he said, his voice low but steady. "He may remain for now. But I will judge him with my own eyes. If he means harm, he will not leave these walls alive." Arun met his gaze calmly. "I ask for nothing but her safety." The king gave no reply, but his eyes burned with the weight of his vow. That night, the palace lit its halls with lanterns in celebration. Musicians played, banners waved, and the people rejoiced that their princess had returned. But in the king's heart, the fire of doubt still burned. He had his daughter back, yet she called another man father. The thought gnawed at him like a shadow in his chest. He swore silently that he would watch the human closely. The morning sun shone over the palace, its light spilling across white stone walls and glimmering towers. The streets below were quiet now, as the people returned to their daily lives after the celebrations of the princess's return. Inside the palace, the halls echoed with soft footsteps and the occasional rustle of silk. Arun walked beside Liri, whose small hand still clutched his tightly. She had grown accustomed to his presence, and even the grandeur of the palace could not shake her trust. The king observed them from a distance, his face unreadable. He had spent the night thinking, pacing the halls, weighing his pride against his love for his daughter. Arun had kept his word. He had not harmed the princess, he had not lied, and he had always treated her with care. The king had been forced to admit that perhaps this human was not the threat he had imagined. Queen Serena entered the hall, carrying Liri in her arms. Her eyes softened as she looked at the king. "We cannot force her heart," she said quietly. "She chooses who she trusts. And we must honor that choice." The king nodded slowly, though his shoulders remained tense. "I will try," he said. "But it is difficult to accept." Liri, sensing the tension, looked up at both of her parents. Her silver eyes were bright and curious. "Daddy, stay?" she asked Arun. Arun smiled gently, kneeling to her level. "I will stay, Liri. I promise. But we must all work together now. Your parents are here, and they love you." The little girl nodded, still holding on to him. Her hand had become a bridge between the two worlds, the human and the royal. That day, the palace halls were filled with discussion. Advisors spoke to the king and queen about how to balance the child's safety, her trust in Arun, and her royal duties. The king listened, but often his eyes drifted toward the human standing quietly beside them. He could see how Liri leaned on Arun, how she smiled when he spoke, and how she felt secure simply in his presence. By evening, the king called Arun to a private chamber. The room was simple compared to the rest of the palace, with soft mats on the floor and a view of the city below. The king stood near the window, looking out, his hands clasped behind his back. "You have done what I could not," he said finally, his voice deep and steady. "You have kept my daughter safe in the wild. You have earned her trust where my soldiers could not. For that, you have my respect." Arun bowed his head. I did what anyone would do. I only wanted her safe. The king turned, his eyes meeting Arun's. And yet, she calls you father. That is harder to accept. Arun took a deep breath. I do not take that place from you. She calls me that because she felt alone. She needed someone to care for her. You are her father by birth. I am only someone she trusts. The king studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Perhaps it is not weakness to allow her to trust another. Perhaps it is wisdom. The queen entered the chamber quietly, her hand resting on the king's shoulder. We will guide her together, she said. She will learn to love and trust us all. And she will keep what she values, including the human who kept her safe. Lyri watched from the doorway, her small face curious but brave. She ran forward and threw her arms around Arun's waist. Daddy safe, she whispered. Arun hugged her gently. Yes, Lyri. I am safe. And now we are all together. Over the next days, the palace became a place of learning and adjustment. Arun helped Lyri with her lessons, teaching her about the stars, the forest, and even simple games that reminded her of the time they had spent together. The queen guided her in matters of royalty, teaching her how to listen to advisors and speak to the people with confidence. The king spent time watching his daughter, learning to understand her new perspective, and slowly, he began to appreciate the bond she had formed with Arun. One evening, as the sun set behind the tall towers, painting the sky with orange and purple, the king approached Arun and Lyri in the palace garden. Lyri had picked flowers and was weaving a small crown again. Lyri, the king said softly. She looked up and smiled. Father. The king knelt, taking her small hands in his. I am proud of you, he said. And I see that your heart is brave. I also see that the human who saved you deserves our respect. Arun stood nearby, feeling a warmth he had not expected. The king extended his hand. Arun took it, and in that simple gesture, the barrier between the human and the royal family dissolved. Lyri clapped her hands happily and placed her crown on the king's head this time. Both her parents laughed, and Arun bowed dramatically, pretending to be a royal advisor. Lyri giggled, and for the first time since they had met, she felt completely safe and loved. The queen watched them quietly, her eyes full of pride. She knew that the future would be challenging, but the bond between Arun, Lyri, and her family would be a source of strength. The human who had once been a stranger had become part of their family, and that had changed everything. Later that night, Arun stood on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. Lyri sat beside him, her small hand in his, and the sounds of the palace echoed behind them. He thought about the forest, the dangers they had faced, and the journey that had brought them here. Daddy, Lyri said softly. Yes, Lyri, Arun replied. Family, she whispered, smiling. Yes, Arun said, his heart full. Family is not only who you are born to, but also who stands with you when you need them. The little girl nodded, leaning against him. In that quiet moment, the past and the present seemed to meet perfectly. She had found safety, love, and belonging. And so had Arun. The king and queen would continue to guide her, but Lyri knew one truth that could never be taken away: the human who had saved her, who had been there when no one else could, would always be her protector. She had called him daddy, and in her heart, he always would be. The palace slept under the starlit sky, but within its walls, a new family had formed. One forged not only by blood but by trust, courage, and love. And from that day forward, the story of the human who was called Daddy by the alien princess spread across the worlds, inspiring hope and reminding all that family could be chosen as well as born.